The Navajo are a tribe of Native Americans whose earliest settlements lay in the southwestern United States, primarily in what are now the states of New Mexico, Utah, and Arizona. Along with their own ancient tribal war history throughout the Pacific Island campaigns, Navajo men proudly fought alongside fellow Americans during the Second World War. The now famed Navajo Code talkers and their unusual language was used to great effect for the encryption of American radio transmissions, which confounded the Japanese cryptologists who intercepted them. But the Navajo people also speak about things which confound the rest of us. They tell stories about strange things that creep and crawl around the wild desert expanses and forests of the Americas, legends which persist until the present day. One such popular Navajo legend is about evil witches, something that native people call yosi, with it he goes on all fours, skinwalkers. Such a creature is considered half person and half animal. It starts as a medicine man or woman who once used their powers of healing for good, but for some reason they turn to evil, to murder, and to eating the flesh of their human victims, and so they are cursed. They are believed to be immortal. The only way to destroy one is to kill them in their animal form. Not only do skinwalkers bring pain and suffering to their victims, but they can crawl inside a person's mind and control them. They can make them hear things and see things that are not really there, or so the legends go. But while the Navajo people continue to pass down stories about encounters their ancestors have had with these creatures, it seems there are more than a handful of American service members who, while out training in the field, have likewise come face to face with something they could not explain, something that terrified them out of their wits, something that looked like an animal but spoke like a human. This is the Smoke Pit, and these are their stories about skinwalkers. The Navajo Ranch Hand, Tuba City, Arizona. Before we enter into the stories from our military service members, it might help our understanding of these creatures to hear one story that is told by the Navajo people.
Modern times may have quelled the superstitious fear that many native people once held, always cautious of certain creatures, always on the lookout for skinwalkers, but it was once, if not still is, a very real fear. Navajo parents would warn their children that skinwalkers could look like anyone else during the day, then at night transforming into creatures with glowing eyes. Skinwalkers appear during the day too, waiting and watching for their victims. They could run like the wind and easily track down a person. One Arizona Navajo man tells us a story that took place about 100 years ago. This man's name is Art Tracy Jr., and his story was published by fellow natives from the Poca and Tongva tribes in a book subtitled Chilling American Indian Stories. As his mother relayed the story to him in the 1920s or 30s, there was a Navajo man working as a ranch hand for a wealthier Navajo landowner somewhere around the western part of the Navajo reservation in Tuba City, Arizona.
One day, he decided to ask his employer for a few days of leave to go and visit his family where they lived in New Mexico. Riding horseback through desert canyons, mesas, and open range, he eventually stopped along his route to rest for a while. While paused, staring out at the desert expanse around him, he suddenly spotted an old mangy coyote sitting on top of a hill not too far away. The man pulled out his rifle, took aim, and fired, watching the coyote drop to the ground. He then walked over to inspect his kill. Reaching the top of the hill, he was shocked to find not the body of a coyote, but a young Navajo man with long hair, at least part of a young man, and he was dead. The top half of his body was human, the skin painted with designs, and his lower half that of an animal, covered in the fur of a coyote. Now horrified, the man who shot him looked around, wondering what to do. Spotting a deep crevice along the canyon's edge, he dragged the creature's body to the cliff and hurled it over the edge.
His fear growing, he then mounted back up and rode his horse near to death, riding even past nightfall, trying to put as much distance between himself, the creature, and the place where he killed it. Finally crossing the Chuska Mountains, he reached his relative's home just past Shiprock, New Mexico. After recounting his story to them, they too experienced an unnatural fear. "You must never go back to your employer," they told him. "You have to stay here. The relatives of the skinwalker will be looking for answers, and they'll be out looking for you." The Perimeter Patrol, Camp Navajo, Arizona. It stands to reason that a creature that takes the form of a wild animal would more than likely be encountered in the wild. It should be no coincidence then that the majority of these stories take place in the wild, unkempt regions of various military installations, what service members call the field. After all, military bases are often built on undeveloped land covered in dense forests or vast desert expanses, separated from wildland only by a long fence with barbed wire.
But a fence only keeps out law-abiding people. Animals and unexplained creatures will always find a way around such trivial man-made barriers. This account was submitted by Stacy C. on behalf of her uncle Bob R. Around 1985, Bob was new to the Army, about 3 years in, stationed on patrol duty at a base in Arizona, most likely Camp Navajo, a munitions storage facility near Flagstaff. Late one night, Bob and another soldier were walking the perimeter fence line. They were focused on looking out beyond the fence, outside the base, when they heard a sound behind them coming from the inside, their side of the fence. When they turned around, they saw an old man dressed in buckskin, with long hair and braids so gray they almost glowed in the moonlight, standing approximately 30 feet behind them in a restricted area. Both men drew their weapons. They could have shot him, but figuring he had Alzheimer's and had wandered in, they shouted at him to put his hands up. Bob tried to call headquarters on his radio. "HQ, this is Rover 1, come in, over." But all he got was static.
Asking his buddy for help, both turned to tinker with the radio. They looked away for only half a second. When they turned back, the old man was completely gone. In his place sat a massive rabbit, just watching them. As both men looked left and right in disbelief, the rabbit took off toward the fence. Then they heard another noise behind them. Turning around, the same old man was now standing on the outside of the 8 to 10 foot tall fence. There was no physical way an old man could have jumped that obstacle in seconds. Terrified, Bob and his buddy took off running and agreed never to tell their commander. Over 30 years later, Bob still looked scared to death, recounting how he had seen a skinwalker. Skinwalker Guns, Camp Pendleton, California. The following story comes from an unnamed Marine training in the desert wasteland of Marine Corps Base Camp Pendleton in Southern California. His squad's nickname is Skinwalker Guns, born from a terrifying night during a division-level exercise called Steel Night above Camp Horno Combat Town.
Attached to a defense position, the gun squad was sitting around listening to a buddy explain how he had seen a skinwalker when he was younger, claiming it was still following him to this day. Around 01:30 in the morning, their newest Marine, a boot fresh out of boot camp, kept complaining about hearing weird noises down the hill. He described it as sounding like the clicking sound from the movie Predator, but faster and louder. The Marine who had seen a skinwalker confirmed that the creature he saw made that exact same sound. The squad went completely silent, listening into the dark. Sure enough, a strange sound accompanied by screeches and heavy rustling began moving up the brush on the front side of the hill. One Marine looked down through a 1-3 golf thermal optic and froze. Down the slope was a deer-like figure, but it was standing completely upright on 2 legs. As soon as he caught sight of it through the thermal lens, the creature sprinted straight up the hill on 2 legs, bypassed their defensive line on the right flank, dropped back down onto all 4 legs, and vanished down the backside of the hill. Another Marine named Rick confirmed seeing the exact same thing through his skier thermal optic. From that night on, the squad adopted the name Skinwalker Guns. The Screaming Blois, Dixie Fire, Northern California. This account comes from a National Guard soldier serving on a security detail during the 2021 Dixie Fire in Northern California, the largest single wildfire in the state's history. Guard members were assisting local authorities by blocking roads to keep civilians out of dangerous burning areas. A lieutenant, a driver, PFC Bravo, and the soldier were making rounds in their truck to check on checkpoints. They pulled up to a roadblock equipped with a portable generator light and stood around talking with the crew. Suddenly, the sound of a woman screaming echoed out from the pitch-black woodline, startling all 6 men.
The lieutenant and the soldier readied their weapons and took a few steps toward the trees. They had been briefed that mountain lions attacking deer can sound like a screaming woman, but this was too close and sounded terrifyingly human. The lieutenant stepped forward and yelled out into the dark, "Hello?" Instantly, coming clear as day from the exact direction of the screams, a voice replied, "Hello?" It was not an echo. It came back immediately, mimicking the lieutenant's exact voice, pitch, and cadence. Overcome with immediate dread, the soldiers didn't hesitate. They ordered the checkpoint crew to lock themselves inside their vehicle, scrambled back into their own truck, combat locked the doors, and rapidly got the hell out of there, convinced a skinwalker was trying to lure one of them into the trees. I know you're there, MCB Quantico, Virginia. The final story comes from a Navajo military police officer stationed at MCB Quantico in Virginia.
Quantico's west side, where officer training and firing ranges are located, spans massive wilderness with abandoned back roads, old homestead cemeteries, and forgotten World War II training areas. One dark November night, the MP drove far out onto a remote dirt road, parked his Durango, and walked a mile into a creek bottom to check a trail camera he had set up in a tree stand. After pulling the memory card and sitting in his tree stand to review the photos on his laptop, he heard footsteps crunching through the woods about 30 yards in front of him. Thinking it might be a lost lieutenant on Nightland navigation, he shut his laptop and turned off his flashlight to mess with them. The footsteps stopped 20 yards away. In the bright moonlight, he made out the outline of what looked like a deer. But then, the animal did something horrifying. It began violently bashing its head against a tree trunk over and over and over again, until its skull was completely crushed, dripping blood and brain matter onto the bark.
Then the creature stood up on its hind legs like a human, turned its ruined head directly toward the tree stand, and spoke in the clearest, most natural human tone he had ever heard. "I know you're there." Frozen in sheer terror, the MP couldn't even draw his sidearm. The creature dropped back onto all fours and walked away into the dark. Shaking violently, the MP waited 10 minutes, abandoned his laptop and gear in the tree, ran back to his patrol car, grabbed his shotgun, and spent the remainder of his shift sitting in the fully lit parking lot of the base exchange. It took a month for him to summon the courage to retrieve his laptop, bringing an armed buddy along. When they reached the spot, the tree trunk was splintered and covered in dried blood and bone fragments. He never went back into those woods at night again.